Exodus is shaping up to be a good game. It looks good graphically. The environment, characters, art style, and concept art we have seen so far looks stunning. Combat-wise, it looks solid, and the lore is just amazing. The book that came out for Exodus is just some pure good fiction. The secret level episode, Odyssey, is really well done as well. And the new Exodus Encyclopedia is full of amazing lore and designs. Overall, it's pretty engaging. But it's clear to many that Exodus is in many ways inspired by Mass Effect, with many of the developers on Exodus being a part of Mass Effect with such big names such as James Olm, who worked on ME and DAO, and Drew Karpyshkin, who was the lead writer on the first two Mass Effects and wrote the first 3 books. And there is the framing of the game as a spiritual successor to Mass Effect, with the developers speaking on it in a recent live stream.
Awesome. Somebody asked, if I like Mass Effect, how hard will I like your game?
Really hard.
Really hard.
Really hard. Okay, there we go. Do you know what?
Drew Karpyshkin, the lead writer of Mass Effect 1 and 2, who's anyway.
So maybe even ultra hard.
But what does this mean? Well, it means that Exodus is trying to capture the spirit of Mass Effect. Like the most of spiritual successors, it is trying to either reiterate on Mass Effect, basically make Mass Effect but with the names changed, or take an aspect or aspects of Mass Effect and explore the conclusions of those aspects. So, for example, a hypothetical spiritual successor could explore the more dystopian aspects of Mass Effect or the more utopian. But is Exodus a spiritual successor to Mass Effect? The devs say it is, but is it actually? That is the question I want to answer in this video. But in order to do that, I have to go through what the spirit of Mass Effect is. Right off the bat, I have to say that this is my interpretation of the spirit of Mass Effect. I tried to include ideas that people would agree with, but I feel it's necessary to say that this is what I think the spirit of Mass Effect is, and these ideas will overlap with other Bioware games as well. So I think the spirit of Mass Effect is these 9 ideas. The type of RPG it is, telling stories and conveying lore through characters, the kind of sci-fi it is, choices and consequences, spanning 3 games, the protagonist aka Shepard, characters and companions, lore, Reapers, and the vibes. So let me expand on what I mean by these ideas and see if Exodus matches up to it. What I mean by type of RPG is what Mass Effect interprets as what the role the player will play. RPGs generally have 2 different ways to be made. One where the role is defined by the player, and the other where the role is defined by the developer. The latter one is what Mass Effect does. What this means is that the choices and dialogue are informed by the role being played. The player isn't informing what choices and dialogue are available. A player might want to have the option to kill the council the first time they meet them, but they can't, because Shepard won't consider that. Shepard won't let them die, but only would happen in a certain situation. Shepard won't pull the trigger. That is why the Paragon and Renegade system exists. It is a mode of operation and a reputation system. It is to show the different ways Shepard can act, be, and perceive. Additionally, another thing to know is that the choices offered could be also thematic ones. Choosing whether to kill, ally, or make peace with the Quarians have thematic undertones to it. Mass Effect is that type of RPG. So how does Exodus compare? Well, I don't know. Due to the game not being out, I can't make a definitive statement. And the external media doesn't really have any answer for this because it doesn't involve June. Obviously. We haven't seen dialogue options or what choices we can make, only snippets of the game. I also haven't seen if the game follows the general structure of Mass Effect, but that doesn't mean that there is nothing to say. We are playing as a named voice protagonist who has a defined background. As per the description of The Traveler, the title of our character, you are June, the heir of Oren Aslan, a legendary traveler from the world of Lidon. A renegade amongst the stars, a hunter of secrets and alien technology, inheriting the gift of neural induction from your mother, Ava, born of celestial heritage, you are able to interact with celestial technology unlike other humans. This specificity of our character does indicate it will be more similar to the kind of RPG Mass Effect is than, say, Fallout New Vegas. June's first name can be customized like Shepard. This indicates that the developers will have a lot more control on who June will be, what June can be, and how June will act. Shepard never had this level of developer control, so it seems it to be exploring the idea of a set protagonist more thoroughly. This will be most likely lead to the game posing questions, conflicts, and challenges that are tailored to who June is as a character, and not the broad ones that are meant to appeal to everyone. So I'll say it is a successor in this regard. One of the biggest reasons Bioware is so popular is that they tell stories and convey lore through characters. What this means is that the story is conveyed through the perspective of characters. An example of this is how Anderson reacts to doing the accusation against Saren. He is emotional about it because he had a history with him. The reason he acted the way he did wasn't because the story needed him to do it, but because it was in his character to do so. Same with how the council reacts to Saren being accused of attacking Eden Prime and killing Nihilus. Their characters are biased towards defending Saren, because Saren is their best operative and they have no reason to doubt his claims. But when evidence shows otherwise, they will take the appropriate action. This also deepens the characters and story because it shows that Anderson and the Council view Saren differently because of what they saw and heard Saren do. Lore is conveyed this way as well. Tali describes the Geth as murdering machines and not people who rose up to defend themselves. If you mention to Tali that the idea that the Geth are just people, she will buckle against that. It shows more sides to the lore and how characters view things because of the circumstances they are in. So how does Exodus compare? We haven't seen much of the story or lore being told through characters in Exodus. The only indication we have is external media. The secret level episode Odyssey does this by conveying how the time dilation affected the characters involved. Nick was such a younger man at the start, but by the end he has aged so much, but his daughter Mari has aged more. At the end, when they get together, Mari talks about what a life she has lived, what she did, and how grateful she was to live it. Time has changed them both. Note that I only talked about how time dilation was conveyed to the characters and not anything else. We don't really get the different perspectives on what people think about the Dawn or anything else. We get to see Celestials and how they are slaves, but there is more used to convey on how Nick is doing that because it's a chance to get to Mari, not really exploring that side of things, which, to be fair, the whole episode was focused on exploring and showing the journey Nick is on to find his daughter. So what about the book? Well, the book is much better in this regard. Though I don't really want to mention the book because from what I've read of the book, or listened rather, it is truly an amazing piece of fiction, and I do implore you all to actually go read it yourself or listen to it via audiobook. Safe to say, it does this aspect of Mass Effect very, very well. But that is from the external media. There is no way of knowing definitively if it will be the case in-game, which makes sense because the game isn't out yet, but we can look to everything surrounding the game, and from what I described, this game does an amazing job at that. Though there is an issue I have to talk about. A common thread with all the external media and marketing focus on time dilation, and how it is used for the choices and consequences. When the developers talk about what their favorite parts of the game is, it's mostly the time dilation and its lore. I don't think it is unreasonable that the game itself will feel like the characters are being used to explore time dilation, that they are emphasized, though I will come back to that at a later point. I will say that Exodus is a spiritual successor in this regard, but exploring it from a different angle. The kind of sci-fi Mass Effect is a space opera. There are some hard sci-fi elements like how the setting explains the mechanics of Element Zero, allowing for faster light travel, but only some elements. It's much more focused on the melodrama, adventure, and relationships, which is very true to Mass Effect. The sci-fi is more of a stage for the story and the characters. Whereas with Exodus, a lot of the marketing is trying to make it seem like a hard sci-fi or harder sci-fi game than Mass Effect, with James Olm talking about how they consulted and did a lot of research into how the mechanics work.
Oh yeah, we've taken the development of this science fiction universe very seriously, and the science behind any of the features within the universe is something we've definitely thought about. But more importantly, we've been working with some of the best science fiction authors in the world, some of the best directors and concept artists, and we're going to talk more about that in January, actually.
But that isn't really true. Throughout the gameplay trailer, it seems to be very similar to Mass Effect's space opera sci-fi, and this rings true for the books and the secret level episode Odyssey. The problem is that Exodus sci-fi is only speculative. How will humanity evolve in 40,000 years? Exodus says that humanity will be very advanced, with some humans evolving into Celestials, who are so advanced that their technology could be indistinguishable from magic. But the problem with that is the current science can only say it's maybe possible. Not that it is going to happen. Hard sci-fi wants to explore what will happen, not what is maybe possible. Exodus sci-fi is more speculative than anything, which is more in line with how Mass Effect's idea of sci-fi And from what I previously said about the external media, it seems that Exodus will have a good helping of melodrama, adventure, and relationships. So it is similar in that way. So yeah, Exodus is a supposed successor to Mass Effect in that regard, but it seems like it doesn't want to acknowledge this. It wants to be seen as a harder sci-fi than not. When Mass Effect was initially pitched, one of the things Casey Hudson imagined doing is a trilogy. Why a trilogy? Well, because he wanted to explore choices and consequences over a long span of time.
That have never really been done before. Well, the idea of creating a trilogy that preserved your choices, not just throughout one game, but across the entire trilogy, was actually in the very original concept for Mass Effect and what the trilogy was about. And that's one of the things that I'm most proud of, actually, is that back in 2005, we announced Mass Effect. And we talked about what it was, and we talked about that it was a trilogy, and that there would be this concept of being able to move your save game across. Now, it's very important to also mention that we build these games so that people can enter them at any point, and that it's a great starting experience, and that's how Mass Effect 3 is designed. In fact, better than ever, it's a great place to start in the Mass Effect universe. But for people who have played with us all along, the idea that you create a character and then these choices and these relationships actually span huge game titles, that's something that's never been done before, and I would argue might never be done again. It's very hard, very expensive, very complicated. And even the idea of saying that you're going to do a trilogy, you have to plan that you're going to do that.
But so many of Mass Effect 1's choices are made with the intent of later payoff. They are compelling, but they are isolated to the game. You don't see the immediate effects of your big choices often. The idea was to take what an RPG was known for, choices and consequences, but then expanded that over the course of several games. Now, this was done for the original Baldur's Gate series, but not exactly. Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 only carried over the player's protagonist level and alignment, and their romance option. Mass Effect attempts to bring more things over, like choices, such as what happens with the Arachne Queen. If you let her live, it isn't shown what happens, only a promise to show what will happen in the future. It compels the player to think on the future consequences. The choices to let the Queen live or die is compelling because of what each choice means. The Queen simply says the Arachni went to war because they were forced to, alluding to the Reapers. So it's clear that the Arachni aren't inherently violent. They were forced to war, so why let the sentient race die? Well, what if the Reapers influences them again? The Queen hasn't been shown to resistant to the Reapers, so it's more than likely that the Arachni will attack again. That is what makes the choice so compelling. The actual consequences of the choice didn't really matter. It was asking you to care about this world in hopes of future games realizing that choice. Now, the Arachne Queen wasn't paid off super well, but that is the core on what makes the choices and consequences so Mass Effect. Which leads into another Bioware staple, that is the moment of questioning. In Bioware games, when the player is presented the choice, it usually is compelling enough to have the player go, wait, hold on a minute, where the player is challenged on their initial assumptions. Oftentimes, there is a correct answer, but it is these moment of questions that makes the choices more than it is. And this is where Exodus is the same, but differs massively. Nowhere in the marketing is Exodus claiming to have 2 or more games in store. It seems that Exodus will be a standalone game, so the focus of its choices and consequences lie in its time dilation.
I think the idea with time dilation and the opportunity to bring that to players in a way where the consequences of their choices are going to be so magnified is kind of overwhelming in an exciting way for us as game makers. Ultimately, that plus the freedom to really build a game in the way that we view to make a great player experience has always been something we've wanted to do. And doing it together and with this amazing studio that we've got has been a great opportunity and kind of a lifelong dream.
So I've been interested in time dilation since I was a kid and read about it because it's pretty crazy, the concept of time dilation. I mean. And another thing is just having the freedom to build the games that you want to build. That's awesome. That's what everyone wants when they get into the games industry.
It is promising the player that they will see the choice have an effect in the game, that they will see the logical conclusion of them across time. While Exodus isn't planning on showing its choices over the course of 3 games, it is placing a huge focus on choices and consequences. Time dilation is a major part of the setting. It features prominently in the external media and is in almost every marketing and interview of the game we'll talk about.
It's difficult to talk about the total span of years for the game without spoiling things, but I can say this. When we first started thinking about the IP back in 2019, one of the things that excited us the most was the potential to see huge changes in your home civilization based on the choices you make. For this game, the trick is going to be to give you enough time to grow attached to your homeworld and get invested in the characters there before we send you on your first interstellar mission.
So the game will feature a heavy emphasis on the choices and consequences, but through a different means. Still having choices and consequences at its core, but it will be done through a different method. As for the game having the moment of questioning, well, the game will have to come out to see if that is true or not. So Exodus does have an emphasis on choices and consequences, but it isn't doing the same way as Mass Effect, but it is in the spirit of what Mass Effect is doing. As I've said before, it is taking an aspect of Mass Effect and using it in a different way. But this is where I need to discuss something. Throughout the whole video, I have discussed how Exodus places a huge emphasis on time dilation. It is everywhere. From marketing, interviews, to the external media, everything Exodus is trying to tell its fans and customers is that the game is about using time dilation to explore choices and consequences. The franchise is setting up the expectation that time dilation is a core concept it is going for, that it is the reason you are engaging with it. Mass Effect set up the expectation that the series is about Shepard and the Reapers. Andromeda struggled with that because the players came in with those expectations, that Ryder wasn't enough like Shepard, or that the Keths weren't as threatening as the Reapers. Even the first book for Mass Effect, Revelation, had a Shepard-like protagonist and the main threat was the Reapers. Not explicitly so, but it was the looming bad guy, like in Mass Effect 1. Exodus making time dilation a focus with the secret level episode Odyssey and the Archimedes Engine book is setting the expectation up. It means that when Exodus does a deviation, people won't be as interested in it. Only hardcore fans will like it, which isn't bad, but it does mean that the developers will be incentivized to make more stories about time dilation. It also means that Exodus has a time limit on how many time dilation stories it can tell before it exhausts all the stories it can tell. There's only so many ways and angles that you can do it before the "I have barely aged today but all my loved ones are dead" or "I have built a society over the course of centuries, it is now good because I did good things or bad because I did bad things," before people grow tired of it, and more importantly, the concept has been explored thoroughly. Mass Effect, for how much it focuses on Reapers and Shepard, still has other stories it can tell. Most of the side quests and DLCs are tangentially related or have no relation to the Reapers or Shepard. In Mass Effect 1 alone, you have side quests about AI, religious freedom, and smuggling. In the DLCs, Mass Effect 1 has Batarian terrorists attacking a human colony because they believe that the planet is theirs, or participating in a military simulator with other species. There is so much more that Mass Effect can do than just the Reapers and Shepard, and has done. It is easier to imagine a C-Sec cop story or a smuggler's story set in Mass Effect. While I can't really do that for Exodus, Exodus side quests and DLCs will have to account for time dilation, because the whole premise of it is literally about seeing the choices and consequences in the future. If you destroy a smuggler organization, when the player will expect the world to see the outcome of their decision. Like if the player returns, they would hope to see the effects destroying the smugglers would cause, meaning anything being conveyed will also convey time dilation. But in saying that, this is also a boon to Exodus. One of the biggest issues with Mass Effect 1 is the urgency of the plot is undermined because the player can ignore it. When you get your ship, Anderson and Udina will say that they have lost contact with Pharos and Liara, and Benezia has been seen on Noveria. All those quests are urgent. Pharos would be lost, Liara would be dead, and Benezia would have long since left. That is what is being conveyed, that if the player ignores it, that it might happen, but the player can ignore it with no consequences. The game isn't focused on its plot entirely, which is a good thing because it allows the game to explore the world more, but also undermines the urgency of the situation. Exodus being so focused on its time dilation is a con, but it's also a pro. It makes the game's themes of exploring time dilation ever present, meaning there won't be an issue with some aspects of itself being undermined like with Mass Effect 1's main quest. Why I bring this up isn't to dunk on the game, but to set expectations of it right. James Olin and the marketing for Exodus paints Exodus as an expansive universe that can tell many different kinds of stories, and I just don't think that is going to be true. With Exodus being so focused on time dilation, every story set in Exodus will have to account for time dilation. It's not like it's impossible for Exodus to have a story that doesn't account for it, but it's setting the expectation up for it. All the external media out for Exodus right now focuses on that concept. People, when they come in, will expect it to be the main thing Exodus is doing, and any deviation will therefore not be as accepted widely. As I said before, Mass Effect Andromeda struggled with this because fans built the expectations that Mass Effect is about Shepards and Reapers. Exodus is doing the same thing, but for time dilation. The only way for them to break free of this is to basically make the Gates of Heaven, the mass relay equivalents, turn into mass relays. But that would be quite terrible because it would take away what the developers are saying is a unique part of the setting. Now they could do that when they exhausted the time dilation concept, which will make it feel a bit better, making it more strategic and allowing the setting to live longer, though it will be a fundamental change. But there can be an issue with it, or simply make more stories that don't account for time dilation. They could just go that route as well. Now you might tell me mentioning Commander Shepard is odd because I technically already did in the type of RPG section, but there is something worth mentioning that deserves its own section. Commander Shepard is the face of the franchise. It's why Andromeda struggled. Commander Shepard is so core to the identity and feel of Mass Effect to many fans. Commander Shepard has a presence, and that is, in part, thanks to the voice acting work of the wonderful Mark Meir and Jennifer Hale, but also on how essential Shepard is to the story. They are the only ones who can stop the Reapers. It enhances the narrative that we have such a set protagonist. Because the narrative can actually use Commander Shepard, Shepard has beliefs and values beyond the player that can't be changed. So the narrative can challenge those beliefs and values for story purposes. It results in something that makes Commander Shepard so compelling. And Exodus, if it wishes to be a spiritual successor, needs a personality like Commander Shepard, who dominates the screen. And June just doesn't feel like that for me. Now, I'm only talking about how I feel. What I have seen from June doesn't feel like they dominate the screen as much. June feels more like Ryder.
Loaded weapon is a hell of a way to greet your new partner.
So you're June.
Deep breaths. You're gonna want to take it easy.
I've been taking it easy for 600 years.
Right.
A much younger, inexperienced person learning the ropes. In the first look of June, they clearly aren't in the leadership position. They are assisting and following Tom Farkas, a companion in Exodus. Commander Shepard was modeled after 90s action heroes, while Ryder was more modeled after 2000s action heroes. They are more quippy and less serious than Commander Shepard. I don't think that is a bad because I like Ryder, but if this was a spiritual successor to Mass Effect, having June not be like Commander Shepard feels a bit off. So in that way, I think Exodus isn't a spiritual successor, but maybe you, the viewer watching this, feel different. Characters and companions are very important to the feel of Mass Effect. As I've mentioned before in the telling stories and conveying lore through characters section of the video, characters are so important to Mass Effect. Why I mention this is to specifically look beyond what they offer in a utility sense. Yes, the characters do help convey the story and lore, but beyond that they are believably written. You get a great feel of who Rex is as an individual. Beyond him serving as our intro into Krogan culture and their mindset, he feels real. All his issues with the Krogan feel genuine. After the Genophage was deployed, all he wanted to do was to ensure that his people's existence. He tried so hard to make sure that they didn't just let themselves go extinct, only to be faced with his own father, who didn't care for what he was trying to do and attempted to kill him, given him his cynical belief that the Krogan aren't worth saving. After all he has done to try to save them, they willfully refuse to be saved. It's believable. Why he is who he is makes sense. He isn't what he is because the game demands it, but because that is the only path that makes sense. His core belief is the continuation of his people, and how he thought best to enact that belief is to try and have them stop fighting and focus on making children. But when shown that his people seemingly don't want to continue existing, he gives up. And that is what makes the characters such a core part of Mass Effect's spirit, this believability. Now this believability is constructed, but it is constructed well. And this is one of the hardest things to do because we only have Odyssey and Archimedes' engine to go off of. But for them there is a sense of believability too. Nick cares for his daughter, cares for her so much that he's willing to spend decades for her, looking and trying to make sure she is safe. The first moments we meet with him makes this fact true enough. And with Archimedes' engine this is also very true. But again, I do highly recommend you actually read the book yourself or listen to it because it is generally a really, really good book. What makes Mass Effect lores so compelling? I think what makes it compelling is the same reason the characters and companions are so compelling. It feels believable, but it also has history. Mass Effect, while space opera, tries to make its sci-fi at least casually believable, if not more. From inventing a new element to make faster-than-light travel possible, to making it believable on why the aliens look and behave the way they do. The interaction and culture clash that the aliens have with each other is also interesting. The Turians are a militaristic race because of their culture and history, that is used to make it into conflicts with the other races, like the humans. And the history of the setting is vast. Ask a question like why are the Krogan the way they are, and you get a detailed history on them being uplifted by the Solarians to stop the Rachni. They were praised for defeating the Rachni, but due to them being uplifted in the way they were, to be killing machines they took to conquest, until they were put down by the genophage, which caused their birth rates to lower, which leads to us to where they are today, a dying race. And even in this retelling, I am skipping details for the sake of flow. Exodus excels at this. Earth has declined, its environments have been decimated, and the only hope is sending Ark ships to inhabit nearby worlds. Not all the Ark ships reached those worlds, but some did, and those people developed over the course of 40,000 years, advancing so far that they have changed. They are the ones who developed the gates of heaven, the mass-read equivalents, and changed into the Celestials. They have moved far beyond humanity. They also created many beings in those 40,000 years. Just looking at the timeline provided and the book that we were given shows the world has history, and it is believable. I won't get in too much into it because I do think you have to try to explore the lore yourself, but it is quite cool. So Exodus is a spiritual successor to Mass Effect's lore. It has this believability and this history alongside it that is very typical of Bioware games. Reapers is an odd thing to consider to be part of the spirit of Mass Effect. But why I say this, like a shepherd, they dominate the games and are seen as inseparable from the ideas of Mass Effect. The whole Mass Effect trilogy is about stopping them, and they are so integral in how the setting developed and its themes. They made the mass relays and thus how life develops. Every 50,000 years they come along and harvest the galaxy. They are a major end-game threat. They also expand upon the AI discourse that the games have always touched upon. They are core to why the Mass Effect setting is the way it is. And Exodus has this in the Celestials. They are hyper-advanced and their technology has been influential on humanity. The whole point of the Travelers is going out to help humanity, and this often involves taking Celestial technology and using it for humanity's benefit. Celestials also create this setting's Mass Effect's relays, Gates of Heaven. Obviously they work differently, but it invokes the mass relays. There is even an existential threat similar to the Reapers in the Yama, who is an all-consuming creation of the Celestials. Celestials even have an antagonistic relationship with humanity. The only difference is that the Celestials were humans. In lore, Celestials are evolved humans, who are stronger, more intelligent, and better, who are so evolved that they are often described as gods. The Reapers being separate from other races is a deliberate choice to make them so distant and above the concerns of the Milky Way races. What they value and care about is so different. But the Celestials being rooted within humanity changes things. It emphasizes how distant they are from normal humans and invokes themes along those lines. The themes the Reapers invoke and the Celestials invoke may cross paths every once in a while, but they're coming from different angles, different origins. So while it is not the spiritual successor in all but name kind of way, it is taking the idea of a distant alien race that is so advanced that they might as well be magic, who holds contempt for lesser beings in a different way. So it is a spiritual successor in this regard. Vibes. What do I mean by that? Well, it is hard to describe, because what the vibe of something is different from person to person. Someone can say that the vibe of Mass Effect is the lore, another can say the characters, some can't describe it at all. So I can only answer what the vibe of Mass Effect is for me. Opening up Mass Effect for the first time and hearing Vigil's theme play is what Mass Effect really is to me. It's the invocation of mystery, intrigue, hope, but also a subtle melancholy. The view of Earth frames the theme as one of cautious exploration. Humanity is now out in the stars, expanding and growing, developing new relationships. It is hopeful but also worry. What will we find in the echoes of space? And when we reach Ilos and Vigil himself, the theme is reframed. It is now about loss, a deep loss, a loss that spanned millions of years. The echoes are now reframed as the memories of long-dead civilization, and that it might happen to the Milky Way races as well, for some distant civilization will hear the echoes of them. The races we meet, the aesthetics, and everything I talked about thus far, that is what I feel when I think Mass Effect's vibe is. And Exodus hasn't given me that. The vibe it most invokes is Andromeda. From the gameplay to the tone, Exodus is about exploring distant stars to bring what is found there to home. Andromeda is about exploring distant stars as well and bringing it back to a newfound home. Exodus stars June, and from what I've seen of the dialogue, it's much more casual and laid back. June's voice actor as well doesn't have the presence that Shepard has. They seem less like a commanding officer with years of experience, and more like a fresh face looking out to the stars. Ryder is very much like that, not even supposed to be Pathfinder until the role is thrusted upon them. They aren't a leader, they are growing into the leader role. And the gameplay is far more similar to Andromeda than the trilogy. It even has a similar art style to Andromeda. Look at some of the celestial technology and tell me it doesn't at least invoke Andromeda's remnant. In that way, it does pass the vibe check for being a Mass Effect game. I just didn't expect it to be closer to what many have said is not a Mass Effect game. So that is how Exodus is a spiritual successor to Mass Effect. It shares a lot of similarities with it. It is the same kind of RPG. It's gonna tell its story and lore through characters. It's a space opera sci-fi. It has a heavy emphasis on choices and consequences. It follows in the path of Bioware's Protagonists, even if June is more like Ryder than Shepard. Characters and companions will be a big part of the game. Lore will be just as good, and they have a Reaper and a Lore. But the vibes are just off for me. But hey, 8 out of 9 isn't a bad thing. Exodus will most likely be a great game. But this video can't answer the question because the game isn't out yet. So when the game comes out, I will pose the question again and see how successful it is in actually being a spiritual successor. But I wanted to pose the question now to get people thinking on if the game is actually a spiritual successor, to set expectations right on it. I think it is a spiritual successor, but not what a lot of people, including myself, thought it was going to be or wanted. What I wanted, and what I imagine a lot of people wanted, is a Mass Effect game with the names changed. And Exodus is similar, but it's clearly taken a new approach, taking aspects of Mass Effect and spinning it into its own version. Exodus wants to be Exodus, and not Mass Effect, with the names changed, even though I would have liked that. Though one of the things I am looking forward to is how Exodus will blend telling a story across time and space. Thank you for watching the video. It took a long while to make this video with its script and editing, but I hope the results show. Mass Effect is one of my favorite franchises, and I hope to see more of games like it. I am a Bioware shill after all, and I will gobble up any game trying to be like a Bioware game. Hopefully Exodus inspires more games like it. So yeah, thank you again. If you liked the video, perhaps consider liking it. If you disliked the video, there's a button for that too. And if you really liked the video, mayhaps subscribe. Comment down below if you think Exodus is a spiritual successor to Mass Effect, or not, and why you think so. I hope you enjoy your day.